CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories this hour. Niger's military rulers give the French ambassador 48 hours to leave the country, exactly 1 month since they launched a coup, ousting the president. 11 members of Spain's coaching staff resign, condemning the actions of Luis Rubiales at the Women's World Cup final in Sydney. FIFA suspends him and starts an investigation. President Putin orders members of the Wagner mercenary group to swear an oath of allegiance to Russia. And within hours of releasing the names of nearly 400 people still unaccounted for in Hawaii, 100 people come forward to say they're safe. Well, Niger's military leaders have told the French ambassador there to leave the country, exactly a month after they seized power in a coup. Relations between Niger and its former colonial ruler have deteriorated, with France repeating calls for ousted President Mohamed Bazoum to be returned to office. The West African regional bloc, ECOWAS, who's been trying to negotiate with the coup leaders, has said it's ready to deploy troops to restore constitutional order if diplomatic efforts fail. Our correspondent Deji Badamosi is in Lagos in neighbouring Nigeria.
Well, France has actually responded, saying that the ambassador is not going to leave, that the military rulers in Niger do not have the legitimate authority to issue that order, that France only recognizes the legitimate elected government, that's a democratically elected government of President Bazoum. And this is actually not the first time France will be having a brush-off now with the military rulers of Niger. The military regime there had ordered that no plane should fly into the country. It accused France of breaching that order now, and also accused France of freeing some militants. Of course, France denied that. We know that the relations between France and Niger has not been, especially the military now of Niger, has not been the best. And things even got worse when the military now took over power in that country. And we also know that in Niger itself, France does not enjoy as much popularity as a result of, the insecurity in that country. You have about 1,500 French soldiers in the country, and yet you continue to have insecurity in some parts of the country. So it's part of the problems that France was dealing with before the military came to power. And some people have said it's also one of the reasons why people appear to be supporting the military regime right there now. But as it stands, we'll wait to see what happens, because France has said the ambassador is obviously not going to leave that country.
Mm-hmm. And it is, of course, a month now since the coup took place. How is the region dealing with what's happened?
Well, what we are seeing from ECOWAS is that the body is trying to resolve this diplomatically. President Bola Tinubu, who is the chair of the ECOWAS heads of state and government, has dispatched another delegation of religious leaders now to Niger. I mean, they were sent back there 2 days ago, so we're still waiting for them to come back. Remember, they'd been dispatched the first time. They met with General Tiani there, and they had some negotiations, came back, reported to President Tinubu. So they've been asked to go back and try to strike some kind of deal now with the military rulers there. So everyone is waiting to see what happens. We also know that the Algerian foreign minister is touring some of the West African countries like Nigeria, Ghana, as well as Cote d'Ivoire, to try and find a peaceful resolution to all of this, because Algeria has made it very clear that it does not support a military action on Niger, because it feels it will be affected. Remember, Algeria has about a 1,000-kilometer border with Niger now, so it's really worried that any conflict in Niger might affect it. So everyone is waiting to see what happens. But let's not also forget that ECOWAS has said, look, if all of these measures failed, then it would have no choice than to deploy military action.
Deji Banamosi in Lagos there. Our other top story today, 11 members of Spain's women's coaching team have resigned, condemning the behaviour of Luis Rubiales during the Women's World Cup final. It comes hours after the World Football governing body, FIFA, provisionally suspended Rubiales, head of the Spanish Football Association. He has refused to resign after kissing player Jenny Hermoso following the team's victory against England last weekend. Rubiales said Hermoso had consented, something she denies. Our correspondent Ken Brown is in Madrid. So, Ken, a lot of moving parts here. What can you tell us?
Yes, breaking news, the walls closing in on Luis Rubiales. As you mentioned, in the last hour, we've seen 11 members of the women's football team technical staff resign. Some of them said that they were forced to sit in the front row of his bizarre speech yesterday, which he shocked the world when he refused to resign. He even painted himself as the victim of a witch hunt, which is completely bizarre, claiming his kiss with Jenny Hermoso was consensual and mutual, when almost immediately the player herself came out and said that was categorically false. She said that she felt that she was in shock, that she felt vulnerable, the victim of an aggression. Hermoso's teammates now say that they refuse to play for the national team until Rubiales and this administration is removed. And they've had a lot of support worldwide, for example, from England's Lionesses, who they beat in the World Cup final in Sydney. They released a statement saying abuse is abuse, and we have all seen the truth. They called the RFEF a sexist and patriarchal organization. Now, in the United States, we saw a game between Orlando and San Diego last night where many of the players were wearing bracelets that said Contigo Jenny, which is Spanish for with you, Jenny. Players like Brazil's Marta, USA star Alex Morgan, of course, women's football icon Megan Rapinoe has been very outspoken on this issue since the beginning. The government has already begun the process to try and remove Rubiales from his position, beginning with suspension. We heard from Spanish Minister of Culture and Sport, Miquel Iceta, who said that as far as we're concerned, Rubiales is in his final hours. They have opened the same process that they used to get rid of the last Spanish FA president, Ángel María Villar. He was in that position for 29 years. In 2017, finally removed after he was arrested for corruption and embezzlement charges. Now, it looks like Luis Rubiales will not reach that kind of milestone, with the pressure mounting, and this becoming a bit of a global embarrassment for Spain.
So a global embarrassment, not a good look for Spain. Are there signs of the football establishment turning on Rubiales? Does he really have any chance of staying in post?
Well, that looks very unlikely at this point. We have pressure right from the top from Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, who says that his position is now untenable. There are very few people left who support Rubiales. We heard some of them in his speech yesterday that he gave. We heard some applause. Jorge Vilda is still a big supporter. Of course, he's the manager of the women's Spanish national team, but he's just been left completely alone with this resignation of 11 players. There feels like there's a sea change here in the attitudes towards women's football and women in general here. You have to remember that this is a much bigger problem in the context of Spanish society. It isn't just confined to football. Last year there were 32,000 victims of gender violence. Over 1,000 women have lost their lives over the last 20 years at the hands of husbands, boyfriends, partners, exes. This is a serious problem here, and not just in terms of violence. There's all kinds of microaggressions that women have to deal with every day. Now, Rubiales is on the attack. He's threatening to sue politicians. For example, Yolanda Díaz, the leader of the Sumar platform, the left-leaning platform. It's very difficult to separate football and politics sometimes here in Spain. Both are such integral parts of the culture. On the right of Spain's political divide, we've heard politicians trying to play the issue down, saying that it's family violence and not gender violence, and talking about how feminism has gone too far. Yesterday we've also heard politicians on the left. Iceta himself said that this is similar to Spanish football's Me Too moment. So we've heard Harvey Weinstein mentioned. You know, this is the top man in the organization. If he can just grab anyone he wants and kiss them in front of billions of people in a World Cup final, what does that say about male impunity in this country? That kiss was an act of aggression, according to Hermoso, and many people say attitudes like those of Rubiales are part of the problem.
Ken, thanks so much for that. Ken Brown reporting there from Madrid. Well, Semra Hunter is a Spanish football journalist in Barcelona, and I asked her whether she thinks this could be the Me Too movement in women's football.
I think we're really on the brink of something very major here as it comes to a cultural and societal shift. I think we have to capitalize on this opportunity, unfortunate as it is, to actually make significant and real change here in Spain, because there is a problem with sexism, with misogyny, with machismo, as they call it in Spain. It does exist, and unfortunately it's been very normalized for far too long. Women have had to put up with a lot of abuse, with mistreatment, with being ridiculed, with being humiliated, always having to turn the other way and letting men in powerful positions get away with it. We've seen this in all spheres of society here in Spain, across the board. So I think now people are really getting behind this, men and women of all ages are getting behind this to say, now is the time. The whole world is watching us. We cannot let our nation down. We have to do everyone good here and put our best foot forward and really come out from this as best as we possibly can in terms of actually doing some favors to these women who really deserve it after for so very long they haven't been paid attention to and they haven't been heard and they haven't been taken seriously.
So perhaps a really important turning point, and this should still have been a moment of intense celebration for the triumphant Spanish women's football team, but it does seem that there's this culture within the Spanish FA and it is casting a big shadow over the success. You know, how did it come to this?
It's a very good question. It's come to this. It's taken a very long time, quite frankly, for it to come to this. There have been women who previously played for the national team who came out and they spoke quite openly about a systemic abuse that was established by the Federation for the last several years, decade actually, and they talked about how they were openly treated with abusive behavior, how they were controlled, how they were manipulated, how they were afraid to go to the national team at times to represent Spain. They were ridiculed, they were humiliated. And they consistently would file reports to have these kinds of behaviours looked into and investigated. But unfortunately, it just never really amounted to anything. It never really went anywhere. We saw the 15 players in September saying that they didn't want to represent Spain at the World Cup until things were changed within the system and the structure that was in place by the Federation. They were very worried about their mental and their emotional well-being, citing that they were very concerned with the methods that were put into place by Jorge Vilda, the coach, and the coaching staff. Unfortunately, the response they got was for the information to be leaked by the Federation, to be publicly ridiculed as capricious little girls, and told that they were not allowed to come back until they had an apology.
Our thanks to Semra Hunter there. You're watching CGTN. Still to come, we meet the volunteers helping to make the World Athletics Championships function for athletes, press and the fans.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliette Mann.
This this week on Razor. As nature's engineers restore wetlands, they also restore habitats for other animals and plants, as well as reduce the risk of flooding.
It's worth noting, guys, the dynamics of the dam here, really interesting. You've got fairly vertical front face, and then the back end of the dam tapers back down, and they'll push sediment and stones, anything they can get really into the back of that.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Niger's military rulers give the French ambassador there 48 hours to leave the country, exactly 1 month since they launched a coup, ousting the president. 11 members of Spain's coaching staff resign, condemning the actions of Luis Rubiales at the Women's World Cup final in Sydney. FIFA suspends him and starts an investigation. President Vladimir Putin has ordered Wagner fighters to sign an oath of allegiance to the Russian state. The decree, signed by Putin on Friday, makes it mandatory for any military contractor working in Russia to swear allegiance and to follow orders. The move comes 3 days after a plane crash in which the Wagner chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin, was reportedly killed. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova has more from Moscow.
Oh, that's right. The new order that has been signed into law by the Russian President Vladimir Putin suggests that all the volunteer formations as well as groups that are contributing to the execution of tasks given to the armed forces, territorial defense units that are now existent in several Russian regions will all be forced to swear oath to the Russian flag. Now, we understand that this measure is aimed at forming the spiritual and moral foundations for the defense of the Russian Federation, according to the order's text. We also understand that the fighters will have to pledge their loyalty to the Russian Federation, as well as strictly follow their commanders and superior orders and preserve the constitutional order in the country. Now, again, this move is taking place just 2 months after Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner paramilitary group, has raised the so-called March of Justice towards the Russian capital using tanks, and of course days after the presumed death of Yevgeny Prigozhin in a plane crash. So certainly we understand that Russia has been taking measures to take the tighter control over all the units that are now involved into fighting in the so-called special military operation in Ukraine. As of the 1st of July, all the units that are involved in these operations were also forced to sign contracts with Russia's Ministry of Defense. The move that has been seen by many as a good move, because that was providing the opportunity for those fighters to seek insurances, to seek state support, and so on and so forth, should they have any complications with their health in the course of the military actions.
And Dasha, there have been more drone attacks overnight. What can you tell us?
Well, that's right. We have heard about yet another attempted drone attack against the Russian capital. The drone was intercepted by the Russian air defenses. It fell down in Istra region, which is just about 40 kilometers northwest of the Russian capital. We also have heard about more drone attacks against Belgorod region, which is bordering Ukraine. And Ukraine was also accused by the Russian authorities of using cluster munitions to shell the territory of this Belgorod region. At least 6 people have been injured, according to local authorities. So certainly the number and the scale of those attacks is intensifying.
Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow there. Ukrainian officials say that 2 people have been killed as Russian shelling hit a cafe in the village of Podoly in the Kharkiv region. But a Ukrainian commander says its forces have broken through the most difficult line of Russian defences in the south and will now be able to advance more quickly. Kiev launched its counter-offensive in June, but it's been slowed by Moscow's defence lines, reinforced by minefields. A senior EU official has urged Russia to renew a deal to allow the safe export of Ukrainian grain through the Black Sea ports. European Commission Executive Vice President Valdis Dombrovskis says that Moscow's restrictions on shipping of Ukrainian grain is creating problems not only for Kiev, but for many other developing countries. Russia pulled out of the pact last month, claiming the West failed to meet its demands for continuing with the deal. In other news, a day after Hawaiian officials released nearly 400 names of people still missing following wildfires on Maui, more than 100 have come forward to say that they're actually safe. The FBI says it's working to validate a broader list of more than 1,000 people unaccounted for. The death toll currently stands at 115, but authorities warn that is likely to rise. Our correspondent, Greg Navarro, reports from Lahaina.
George Leitch spent the morning along with dozens of displaced fire victims trying to secure a temporary place to live. His Lahaina home is one of thousands of structures here that no longer exists.
Oh yes, my whole neighborhood, 43 years, we were very close.
Leitch also spent the morning scanning the names of the hundreds of people still unaccounted for more than 2 weeks after the deadly fire.
I got halfway down it. I had to stop. Half the infield of my softball team are gone.
The number of people still missing has fluctuated. Once thought to be more than 1,000, now estimated to be 388. Maui's police chief released a video statement acknowledging the pain caused by the decision to release their names.
This is not an easy thing to do, but we want to make sure that we are doing everything we can possibly to make this investigation the most complete, thorough to date.
At least 115 people are confirmed dead. So far, at least 35 victims have been identified, including a 7-year-old boy. Several reminders of the lives lost now mark the area, including this massive string of crosses and yellow ribbons designed to honor loved ones. Some crosses bear the names of victims. While crews continue to search for the remains of fire victims, federal investigators are trying to determine the fire's cause. There is growing concern that downed power lines may have sparked the fire. The island's power company now faces several lawsuits. In fact, Maui County has now filed a lawsuit against Hawaiian Electric over the deadly fire here in Lahaina, saying the utility failed to shut off the power despite the very heavy winds and extremely dry conditions. George Leitch wants people to focus on the resilience and the spirit of his community.
There's still plenty of aloha here in Lahaina, and we'll get through this. Lahaina strong.
A community visibly struggling with what it's lost. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Lahaina.
At least 12 people have been killed and around 80 injured after a stampede at Madagascar's national stadium. Fans were trying to enter the grounds for the opening ceremony of the Indian Ocean Island Games. The Prime Minister says 11 of the injured are in a critical condition. It was not immediately clear what caused the stampede. Nearly 2,000 artefacts, including gold jewellery and gems stolen from the British Museum, have begun to be recovered. The museum, one of London's most popular attractions, said a member of staff was dismissed last week after items dating back from the 15th century BC were taken from the storeroom. The museum director, Hartwig Fischer, has resigned, and his deputy has stepped back over their handling of an investigation into the widespread theft of artefacts. Gabon's President Ali Bongo is seeking a third term in office as the country heads to the polls. 18 other candidates are challenging Bongo, who came to power in 2009 after the death of his father. His opponents say he hasn't done enough to help the millions of people living in poverty, despite the country's oil wealth. SpaceX and NASA's Dragon spacecraft have blasted off, carrying 4 astronauts to the International Space Station. Around 10,000 people gathered at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida to watch the launch of the Falcon 9 rocket. The crew members are from the United States, Denmark, Japan and Russia. They'll spend 6 months on board the ISS, carrying out experiments with the goal to understand if microorganisms can survive and reproduce in space. Now, 8 gold medals are up for grabs at the penultimate day of the World Athletics Championships in Hungary. The women's 5,000-metre final is among the highlights, while China's Huang Bokai and Yao Jie will also compete for a medal in the men's pole vault final. Budapest has drafted in an army of more than 2,000 volunteers to help keep things running smoothly for the athletes, for the fans and even for the reporters at the championships. Our correspondent Peter Oliver is one of them.
Guiding 30,000 or so fans each day to watch some 2,000 athletes represent over 200 countries can be a logistical nightmare. Without the legion of volunteers, the World Athletics Championships simply doesn't happen.
They welcome people at the airport. They help the transportation staff to make sure that everybody finds the right shuttle bus and gets to the right place. Also, they help the visitors, the spectators, to enter the stadium, which is a big task because this full stadium, a lot of people, and this is very hot event in the meantime. They also help in accreditation. The passes that everybody gets are done by volunteers, but we also help the distribution of water or distribution of welcome bags and uniforms.
Away from their serious business of looking after the athletes, the press, and of course all of the thousands of fans coming here to the National Athletics Centre, the volunteers do get a day to enjoy themselves here on the track, taking part in a series of races.
The volunteer program has two roles and two aims. One is to serve the event, to make sure that the event happening, but on the other hand we are also having the task of providing the volunteer the once in a lifetime experience with friendships, with communities, and with all kinds of experiences.
A lot of the volunteers are athletes in their own right and have dreams of returning to the World Championships in the future in a very different capacity.
Because I'm also an athlete. I'm in the national team, in the U20 national team. 200 meters, but I'm also a 400-meter sprinter, and it was also my dream to become a part of this tournament, and I would like to participate in one of these events in the future. This is my goal.
Maria Vicente, the Spanish girl who did the long jump and the triple jump, she told me to keep pushing and to work hard until the end. So that's it. I'm going to do it, and I will be here in a few years.
We're all here to watch the best in the world, but without volunteers like Adam and Luna, there isn't a World Championships for the athletes to compete in. Peter Oliver, CGTN, Budapest.
And finally, the biggest search for the elusive Loch Ness Monster in over 50 years is underway in Scotland. The Loch Ness Centre launched what it's calling the Quest on Saturday and Sunday, saying modern technology such as drones that produce thermal images of the lake will search the waters in a way that has never been done before. Almost 300 have signed up to monitor the live stream from the search. It is 90 years since the modern myth of Nessie began. Next up, it's the agenda, and in this week's show, Juliet Mann dives into the world of water. As demand soars and supply dwindles, can technology help to tackle the growing water crisis? That's the agenda, right after The World Today at 16:30 GMT here on CGTN. Our headlines again. Niger's military rulers give the French ambassador 48 hours to leave the country, exactly 1 month since they launched a coup, ousting the president. 11 members of Spain's football coaching staff resign, condemning the actions of Luis Rubiales at the Women's World Cup final in Sydney. FIFA suspends him and starts an investigation. And President Putin orders members of the Wagner mercenary group to swear an oath of allegiance to Russia. And that is The World Today. Thanks for watching. There's more on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. There's more news at the top of the hour. For now, though, from all the team in London, it's goodbye.